If a merry heart is a good medicine, then hopefully this will be your medicine for today. My eyes are a little puffy because, like a lot of people, I stayed up much of last night just because of the threat of tornadoes in the area with that line of severe thunderstorms that moved through. I'm reminded, thinking about storms, of a very odd thing that happened during a storm one time when I served a church down in the lower part of the state. It was actually not just a regular storm, it was a hurricane that was predicted to make landfall somewhere down near Charleston. And the governor had rerouted traffic on the interstate that particular day. I believe it was Governor Hodges, so that's how long ago it was. I can't even remember the name of that particular hurricane. Nevertheless, the traffic had gotten so backed up, and it was such a late rerouting of the traffic. It was just going nowhere, and people had gotten off the interstate and decided to go through the small towns, the old ways that they used to do. To get back to the upstate. And of course, that led them to come through our town. We were just several miles off the interstate, and they came through and they bought up all the gas at the two gas stations that were in town, and also pretty much bought up what food our little restaurants had in town until it was closing time. And they kept coming, just car after car after car. Eventually night fell and the rain just was relentless. And it was an astounding thing to see so much traffic in that little town because we didn't get a whole lot of traffic. And sometime, I don't know, about 9 o'clock or so that evening, the phone at the parsonage rang, and it was the police chief who was a member of the church. And he said, "Preacher, you got to come see this in front of the police station." And I thought, well, I've seen the traffic. I saw it this afternoon. I really don't want to see that much more traffic. He said, "It's not traffic." He said, "Just come on up here." And so I grabbed an umbrella and walked out the back door of the parsonage because it was just a block off of Main Street, just a couple hundred yards maybe from the police department. And so when I walked up the sidewalk to the police department, the chief and the secretary, who was also our church organist, by the way, was standing there just looking astonished. And I said, "What are you looking at?" And chief pointed, and there was about a 9-foot alligator just walking through town, kind of following what traffic remained up Main Street. Not something you see all the time. Not something you see all the time anywhere, let alone in South Carolina. But see it I did that night. And speaking of alligators, it reminded me of two other alligator stories at a different church. It was a Wednesday night, and I was about to start teaching Bible study at this particular church, a beautiful little church out in the country, out in the farm community. And one of the regulars hadn't gotten there yet and didn't know where she might be. And eventually the doors of the church opened, and there she was. She came in, she looked kind of frazzled. As it turns out, she had run over something on her way out of her driveway. And initially thought it was just a log somehow lying in the road, and she ran over it. And she got out and looked to see what it was, and it was not a log after all. It turns out it was a small alligator, and she apparently had killed it. So she picked it up, tossed it into the back of her pickup truck, and just decided to drive on to Bible study. Well, she had actually not killed the alligator, because by the time she got to the church, she heard this awful beating and thrashing around noise in the back of her pickup truck, and she walked around after she got out and walked around to the bed of the truck to see that the alligator had not been killed. It had apparently just been knocked out, stunned, and and so we had a live alligator at a Bible study. And one more alligator story. So actually, at the same church, one of the saints of the church, one of my just true friends, came by the parsonage one day and said, "Hey, I want to show you something," which is something probably you should always be very wary of when somebody says, "Hey, I want to show you something." But anyway, he said, "Hey, I want to show you something. Hop in the truck and we'll go." And I said, "Okay." So I hopped in the truck, and I noticed in the floorboard where my feet were supposed to go was this big bag of chicken parts, like gizzards and livers and stuff like that. And I was thinking, well, this is not a very good way to carry, chicken around, particularly if you're going to eat it. But then I noticed, no, he's not going to eat this. This is in an old bread bag. And I said, what's the chicken for? He said, you'll see. So we get over to a bridge across the Salkehatchie swamp. And lo and behold, we get out of the truck, and he says, now watch this. And he made this clicking, clucking noise and started to say, come here, come here. And what do you know, if this alligator doesn't crawl out from under the bridge, and he begins to feed the alligator chicken. Never seen anything like it before. I take that back. I paid to see something like it at Myrtle Beach one time when I took my nephew to the alligator show when he was a little boy 20-something years ago. But in person, for free, by a regular, everyday, ordinary guy who lives in a regular, everyday, ordinary place in South Carolina. Never seen anything like it until that day. But then I did. So just goes to show you, when you're a United Methodist pastor in South Carolina, the sky's the limit, or the swamp is the limit for anything you might want to see. And I hope that brings a smile to your face.